it's Tea Egg Stampin' Sharon. Today I want to do a Sunburst card. It's been a while since I've done one, so I thought it'd be fun to use some of the new designer series papers that are going on right now and make a Sunburst card. I hope that you're inspired. If I can ever help you with any of your Stampin' Up! Supply needs, I'd be honored. You can find my store, my website, everything in the description box below. Just click that Read More button. Let's make some cards. There are several ways to make Sunburst cards, and most of the time you see them done this way. But when I was making my card, I was like, oh, I really like it that way. Kind of like the sun rays going down instead of going up. Anyway, I just thought it was something different, and I wanted to share some tips and tricks making my type of Sunburst card. So I have all my pieces already cut out. This is my Very Vanilla Thick, and it is 5.5 by 8.5, scored and folded at 4 1/4. I have my sentiment layers, and my Pretty Peacock measures 3 3/4 by 1 3/4, and then my sentiment layer measures 1.5 by 3.5. I have a layer of Very Vanilla. Now I chose to use thick because I'm going to be putting a lot of liquid glue on here, and it just helps it be a little bit sturdier of a base. This is what we will attach our sunbeams to, or our sun rays on. And this measures 5 inches by 3 3/4. And then I have the mat for that, which is also Pretty Peacock, and it measures 5 1/4 by 4 inches. We all save designer series paper, and this was the beautiful Brightly Gleaming from last year's catalog that carried over, and I thought it would be a great way to remind y'all that you can still get this gorgeous paper. Now, this has copper highlights, and we don't have the copper embossing, but I have an idea for you that will help you coordinate that pretty copper color. Now, this just happens to be 6 inches, which is a good long enough piece to start with. You could get by with like 5 inches, but if you have bits and scraps and stuff, try to use them to make your Sunburst card. All right, so I want to cut several strips that are 1.5. So I have 4 to start with. I can always cut more, but why cut more if I don't need it? It all depends on how I lay the pieces on my Very Vanilla base. So I'm going to line this up in the gutter of the trimmer, and I just want to cut some triangles. A few tips for you. You want to have point to point in the gutter, and then when you lay it down, when you lay the arm of the trimmer down, hold this plastic guard right here, and it really does cut better, especially as your blade starts to maybe get a little bit dull, to pull it forward towards you. Now I am going to use my silicone mat because I know I'm going to get messy, but I'm going to try to keep the mess down to a minimum. You know, our designer series papers has 2 sides, so that's what makes this type of card really pretty. And I loved using the side that has the copper foil look to it. So I'm going to take my liquid glue, and I like to start in the middle and just kind of, I'm going to go off both the top and the bottom. And I'm going to start adding my pieces. The liquid glue allows me to move it around the way I want. And I kind of want to be centered on my card. I know in the past I've started from one side and gone to the other and might not always end up the same pattern the way I wanted. So this time I'm going to start in the center and go from there. You do want to make sure that that top is coming, that the top of your designer series paper is coming off the top of your Very Vanilla. And we have just a little bit down here. I'm actually... And now we're going to do the other side. Just make sure everything is touching and that you don't see any Very Vanilla in between the seams. There we go. Now we have our Sunburst. And I think when I turned my paper this way to do it, that's when I came up with the Reverse Sunburst technique. Now, all of our papers, I didn't make much of a mess. I just have a little bit of glue right there from that. But you really want to make sure that this is completely dry before you can either take your snips and cut off the excess, or you could take it to your paper trimmer, whichever you prefer. I prefer using my snips, so it's just a matter of preference. But we're going to let that dry. So while it's drying, I've pulled out my inks. I've got Cinnamon, Cider, and Pretty Peacock. These are two in colors in the in color family. So the Pretty Peacock is actually from the 2019 to 2021 in color collection. And then the Cinnamon Cider is a new one, and it is from the 2020 to 2022 collection. But they go so pretty together. And I found that the Cinnamon Cider looked really close to my beloved copper. If you've watched any of my past videos, you know how much I love copper. And I'm still petitioning for Stampin' Up! To bring back my copper embossing powder. All right, so I want to stamp the word brat. Oh, I didn't tell you what stamp set this was from. I will grab that and share it with you. And I want to come down as low as I can on my card layer so that I have room to stamp above it. So I'm going to use the Cinnamon Cider, and we're just going to stamp the words Mary and brat is what our sentiment will say. Now, because these are so tiny, it may be hard to get it perfectly straight, like lined up across. So why don't you just drop it down a little bit, and then that takes away all the stress of being straight. The stamp set I used is Peace and Joy. This does come as a bundle, so you can get the coordinating dies, which I have been sharing on some previous videos. But I love the big, bold words, and there's so many things you can do with the dies. So if you have missed my previous video on this a couple weeks ago, then I'll be sure and have it linked in the video. But Peace and Joy is a really super fun stamp set. We're going to adhere these two layers together. You could use any adhesive you want, but when I was using the liquid glue to get my Starburst cards pieces all lined up, I just have it on my craft table. I do have some dimensionals that we're going to use to pop this layer up when we're ready to add it to our card. So this is dry enough now. I do want to remind you, if you choose to use your paper trimmer, really make sure that that glue is dry, because you do not want to gum up the blade on your trimmer. It is super hard to get off. It would be much easier to get it off of your snips if you happen to catch some liquid glue, but I just prefer to be safe. Make sure it's dry. So I'm just going to take my snips and just follow the edge of my Very Vanilla. I know some of y'all are already thinking, what can I do with those big bits that she's dropping off of there? So like I said, this is typically how you see a Sunburst card. But when I was putting mine together, I was like, oh, I really like it this way. But we'll go ahead and put this one together this way so that you can see the difference once it's all assembled. We're going to add our liquid glue. Always double check to make sure your card is opening the right way, because I have been known to put it on upside down. We're just going to add our sentiment layer. And we're going to put this at the bottom. So you tell me, which one do you like better, number 1 or number 2? I like them both. They're both very pretty, especially with that copper foil paper. And these are quick and easy Christmas cards to add to the variety of cards that I'm going to share with you this season. Happy stamping, y'all!